It was the beginning of the school year, and the classroom was filled with the typical hustle and bustle. The air was thick with anticipation, the chatter of students eager to get back to their routines. But for Marcus, it was just another day of feeling different. He was one of the few students in the class who didn't quite fit the mold. His presence, though quiet, seemed to draw unwanted attention, particularly from some of the teachers. They had never outrightly treated him unfairly, but Marcus had grown accustomed to the way they made assumptions about him. One of the most recent incidents had taken place in the music class. Mrs. Bentley, the music teacher, had called Marcus out in front of the class. "Why don't you come up and play the violin for us, Marcus? Let's see what you've got." The class giggled, the sound was mocking, but Marcus just stood there, unsure of what to do. It wasn't the first time he had been singled out for something he had never asked for, and it certainly wouldn't be the last. With a hesitant step, Marcus walked to the front. He didn't play the violin, never had, and the thought of attempting in front of everyone was enough to make his stomach twist into knots. Mrs. Bentley smirked, clearly amused. "We'll see how this goes," she said under her breath, loud enough for everyone to hear. It wasn't the first time he'd been placed in a situation where others assumed he wasn't capable. But something about this moment felt different. He could feel the eyes of his classmates boring into his back, waiting for him to fail. The violin was heavier than it looked as he awkwardly adjusted it in his hands. The class was stifling its laughter, but it was clear they were all expecting him to mess up. Mrs. Bentley stood to the side, arms crossed, and watched him with a strange, almost smug, expression on her face. What the teachers and students didn't know was that Marcus had a secret talent. A talent he had kept to himself, one he had never shared with anyone before. But now, facing the scrutiny of the entire class, he realized that this was his moment. He was going to play. Marcus took a deep breath, the bow in his hand trembling slightly as he brought it to the strings. He had spent years teaching himself how to play the violin, sneaking in practice when no one was around to see. His mother had given him an old, dusty violin she'd found at a yard sale when he was just a child, and from then on, it became his secret companion. As he began to play, the room fell into an eerie silence. The sound of the bow gliding over the strings filled the air, soft at first, but gradually gaining strength. Marcus felt the tension in his shoulders ease as the music began to flow through him, each note clearer and more powerful than the last. The class, which had been prepared for failure, was stunned into silence. Mrs. Bentley stood frozen, her mouth slightly open as she tried to comprehend what was happening. The other students, who had been waiting for him to fumble, watched in disbelief as Marcus continued to play, his fingers moving with a precision that could only come from years of practice. The melody was haunting, soulful, and unlike anything they had ever heard before. It wasn't a simple tune, there was complexity and emotion woven into every note, a depth of skill that seemed to flow effortlessly from Marcus. The performance was beautiful, but it was also raw, powerful, and stirring. His music wasn't just notes and rhythms, it was an expression of everything he had held inside for so long. As he reached the crescendo of the piece, Marcus could feel his heart pounding in his chest. The room was completely still, as if the world had paused to take in the beauty of his performance. When the final note rang out, there was a long, stunned silence. Not a single person moved. Then, slowly, one by one, the students began to clap. At first, it was hesitant, almost as though they were unsure if they were allowed to applaud. But as the applause grew louder, Marcus felt a sense of relief wash over him. He had done it. He had proven them all wrong. Mrs. Bentley, still standing at the side of the room, blinked a few times as if waking from a trance. She cleared her throat. "Well, Marcus, I had no idea. That was exceptional." Her voice was tinged with disbelief. The class was buzzing now, whispering amongst themselves. The teasing and ridicule that had filled the room just moments earlier were gone, replaced with genuine awe and respect. Marcus couldn't help but smile, the knot in his stomach finally unraveling. This was his moment. He wasn't just the quiet kid in the back anymore. He was something more, something they hadn't expected. The days that followed were a whirlwind. Marcus had barely returned to his seat before the whispers started. At first, he tried to ignore them. After all, he was used to being the subject of attention for all the wrong reasons. But this time, it was different. The chatter wasn't mocking, it was full of curiosity, admiration, even respect. Marcus had never experienced anything like this before. In the halls, students who had once ignored him now nodded in passing, offering polite smiles. The rumors about his hidden talent spread like wildfire. By the end of the day, everyone knew about the quiet kid who could make a violin sing like a professional. Even some of the teachers seemed to have a change of heart. Mrs. Bentley was kinder to him now, though she still had an air of uncertainty about her. The way she interacted with him had shifted from dismissive to attentive. She even asked if he would play again for the class, but Marcus politely declined. The last thing he wanted was to be put on display again. He had shared his talent once, and that was enough. However, the real change came in how Marcus began to view himself. The performance had done more than just silence the class, it had given him a sense of pride. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't just a bystander in his own life. He had something valuable to offer, and it wasn't just his quiet nature or his ability to blend in. It was his gift. As the days passed, Marcus found himself practicing more, honing his skills in private. He began to play at home late at night, the sound of the violin echoing in the empty house, soothing his thoughts. His mother, who had always known of his passion, quietly encouraged him. She never pushed him to share his music with others, but she smiled whenever she caught him lost in the melody. But it wasn't just the music that had changed things. It was the way others now saw him. The teasing, the assumptions, the prejudices, they hadn't disappeared, but they had been silenced for a moment. The world was beginning to see him as more than just the boy who didn't fit in. He was a person, with a story, with a talent that deserved recognition. Yet, not everything was perfect. There were still those who tried to minimize his achievement, to claim it was nothing more than a fluke. Some of the other students, jealous or threatened by Marcus's sudden rise, began to make comments under their breath. "He's just lucky," one whispered. "It's just a party trick," another muttered. But Marcus no longer cared. Their opinions didn't matter anymore. He had shown them what he could do, and that was enough. Weeks passed, and the buzz surrounding Marcus's performance began to die down, at least in the classrooms. But it hadn't disappeared entirely. His violin playing, once something private and hidden, had now become a talking point in the school. Though some still whispered behind his back, others reached out to him, offering words of encouragement or invitations to perform. One afternoon, as Marcus was walking through the hallways after class, a familiar voice called his name. "Marcus! Wait up!" He turned to find Justin, a kid from his class who had always kept to himself. Justin wasn't particularly popular, but he had never been one of the ones who teased Marcus either. He was quiet, kind, and seemed to have a genuine interest in Marcus's music. "Hey," Marcus greeted cautiously, not entirely sure what Justin wanted. "I was wondering," Justin said, shifting from foot to foot, "if you'd like to come play at my sister's birthday party next weekend. I know it's kind of random, but you're the talk of the school, man. Everyone's been asking if you'll perform again, and well, I thought I'd just invite you. It'd be cool if you could do something live, you know. No pressure, though, I just thought you'd be awesome for it." Marcus paused. He hadn't expected anything like this. A birthday party? His first real offer to perform, outside of school, no less. The thought of playing in front of strangers again made him nervous, but something in Justin's voice made it clear he wasn't mocking him. The offer seemed genuine. "I don't know." Marcus started, unsure. He hadn't played for anyone other than his mother in years, let alone at a party with strangers. Justin seemed to sense his hesitation and smiled. "It's just a small thing, no big crowd. And it's not like we expect a concert or anything. Just play something nice. You've got talent, Marcus. I think people will appreciate it. Marcus looked down at his feet for a moment, the weight of the decision settling on him. Could he really go through with it? Could he handle the pressure of performing again, knowing that people would expect something extraordinary? But then he remembered the thrill of the last performance, the way the music had flowed from him so naturally, the way the class had reacted. Maybe this was the chance to step out of the shadows once and for all. He couldn't deny that the idea of sharing his talent in a more personal, intimate setting was appealing. Okay, Marcus finally said, his voice more confident than he had expected. I'll do it. Justin's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. Awesome. Thanks, man. It's going to be great. I'll text you the details. As Marcus walked away, he felt a mix of excitement and nerves. The invitation felt like a challenge, a chance to prove that he wasn't just the quiet, unnoticed kid anymore. He had something to offer the world, and this was his chance to show it. The days leading up to the party felt like an endless countdown in Marcus's mind. Each day, he practiced more fervently, perfecting his technique and playing through the pieces he was thinking about performing. His hands had started to feel natural again, the music flowing with ease. But as the party grew closer, so did his anxiety. It was one thing to perform in front of his classmates, where everyone's attention had been thrust upon him. But a party, with strangers and unfamiliar faces? That was a whole new level of pressure. He imagined all the eyes on him again, waiting for him to falter. What if he messed up? What if they didn't think he was as good as everyone said? On the night of the party, Marcus found himself standing in front of the mirror, adjusting his clothes for what felt like the 100th time. His mother had given him a reassuring smile before he left, but she could tell he was nervous. You've got this, Marcus. Just be yourself. You don't have to impress anyone, just play what feels right. Her words echoed in his mind as he arrived at Justin's house. The music was already blaring from inside, the sounds of laughter and conversation spilling out onto the lawn. He took a deep breath before stepping through the door, the weight of the violin case in his hands suddenly feeling heavier than ever. Inside, the party was in full swing. People of all ages were gathered around, chatting, eating, and dancing. Marcus noticed that a few of the guests had already turned their attention toward him, whispering to each other, and then glancing over at him as if wondering when he would play. Justin spotted him across the room and waved him over. Hey, glad you could make it. Justin said, his voice upbeat as he led Marcus to the corner of the living room where a small group had gathered. Everyone's looking forward to hearing you. Marcus felt a wave of nerves, but Justin's enthusiasm was contagious. He gave a small smile and set the violin case down. Justin gestured to a small stage area in the corner, where a few chairs were arranged. We've got everything ready for you. Just let me know when you're ready. Marcus nodded, trying to steady his breath. The room seemed to close in on him, the party noise turning into a dull hum in his ears. Slowly, he sat down, took out his violin, and adjusted the strings. The anticipation in the room was palpable, and for a brief moment, he wondered if he was making a huge mistake. But then, he closed his eyes and remembered the joy of playing for himself. This wasn't about impressing anyone, it was about sharing his passion. He lifted the bow to the strings and began. The first few notes were quiet and uncertain, but soon, he found his rhythm. The music started to take on a life of its own, building slowly in complexity and emotion. His fingers moved with precision, the melody pouring from him in waves, filling the room. The atmosphere shifted, the hum of the party fading away as the crowd began to listen in rapt attention. As he played, Marcus couldn't help but feel a sense of peace wash over him. It was like he was no longer just performing for others, he was performing for himself, expressing everything he had kept hidden for so long. The music was a release, a way to finally be free from the expectations others had placed on him. When the last note lingered in the air, the room was still. For a moment, no one moved, as if time had stopped. And then, the applause erupted. It was loud, genuine, and filled with appreciation. Marcus blinked in surprise, but a smile tugged at the corners of his lips. The room was alive with admiration, and for the first time, he felt like he truly belonged. Justin, who had been standing at the edge of the room, was the first to reach him. "That was amazing, Marcus," he said, clapping him on the back. "You're incredible. I told everyone you were good, but that was beyond what I expected." The crowd around them continued to cheer, and Marcus found himself flushed with pride. His hands trembled slightly, but it wasn't from fear anymore, it was from the overwhelming feeling of accomplishment. For the first time, Marcus realized that the music had done something for him that nothing else could. It had opened the door to a new chapter in his life. One where he wasn't just the quiet kid in the corner, but someone with a voice. A voice that had the power to move others, to make them listen, to make them see him. And as the night went on, Marcus played more, sharing his talent and, for the first time, enjoying the attention not because it was forced upon him, but because it felt right. He had finally found a place where he could just be Marcus, the musician, the artist, and no one could take that from him. The weeks following the party were a turning point for Marcus. The night of his performance had done more than just win him the admiration of his peers, it had given him a newfound sense of confidence. It wasn't about the applause anymore, it was about the way he felt when he played, the freedom that came from losing himself in the music. At school, people no longer looked at him the same way. It wasn't that they treated him differently out of pity or guilt, but there was a quiet respect now, something that had never been there before. Marcus had become known for more than just being the quiet kid in the back of the class. He was the kid who could make a violin sing, the one who had the courage to share something deeply personal with the world. One afternoon, after class, Mrs. Bentley approached him. She was holding a piece of paper in her hand, looking both serious and excited at the same time. "Marcus," she began, "I've been thinking about something. There's a regional music competition coming up, and I think you could really do well in it. I know you didn't sign up for this kind of thing before, but you've got an extraordinary gift. I want to encourage you to think about entering. I'll support you every step of the way." Marcus blinked, stunned by the offer. A competition? He'd never considered putting himself out there in that way, but Mrs. Bentley's words struck a chord. Could he really compete? Could he stand in front of a panel of judges, in front of strangers, and perform the way he had for his classmates? I don't know," he said quietly, his fingers instinctively running over the strings of his violin. "I've never done anything like that before." "You don't have to decide right now," she said, her voice softening. "But I want you to know that I believe in you. You've got something special, Marcus. This could be your chance to really take this gift of yours somewhere." The thought lingered in his mind over the next few days. The idea of competing, of being judged, terrified him. But then he thought back to the party, to the way the music had flowed through him so naturally, to the feeling of being heard for the first time. Maybe this was the next step. Maybe it was time to stop hiding behind his own self-doubt and start believing in the talent that everyone else seemed to see in him. At home, his mother noticed the change in him as well. She could tell that he was thinking deeply about something, but she didn't press him to talk about it. She simply smiled at him one evening as he sat with his violin, practicing. "Whatever you decide, Marcus," she said, her voice warm with encouragement, "I'm proud of you. You've come so far already." Those words stayed with him. His mother's support, his teacher's belief in him, it all began to chip away at the walls he had built around himself. For years, he had been afraid of being judged, of not measuring up to others. But now, it felt different. His music had already shown people who he really was. Perhaps it was time to take that next step and show the world what he could do. After much thought, Marcus made a decision. The next day, he approached Mrs. Bentley and told her he was ready to enter the competition. "I don't know if I'll win," he said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "But I want to try. Mrs. Bentley's face lit up. That's the spirit, Marcus. I knew you had it in you. As the date of the competition drew closer, Marcus poured himself into his practice. He no longer played out of fear or obligation. He played because it was who he was. The violin was no longer just an instrument, it was a part of him, a way to express himself in ways words never could. The day of the competition arrived, and Marcus stood backstage, his violin in hand. His heart was racing, but the nerves were different this time. They weren't paralyzing. They were the kind of nerves that came before something great. When it was his turn, he walked out onto the stage, the spotlight warming his face. The audience sat quietly, waiting for him to begin. And as he lifted his violin, Marcus closed his eyes and remembered why he had started playing in the first place. The music flowed from him, more confidently than ever before. It was a piece that spoke of his journey, the fear, the doubt, the strength he had found in his own talent. Each note rang clear and strong, echoing through the room. As he played, Marcus realized that the audience wasn't there to judge him. They were there to listen, to appreciate the music, to understand him. When the final note drifted into silence, Marcus opened his eyes and saw the audience staring at him, their faces filled with awe. The judges, too, looked impressed. For a moment, everything felt still, frozen in time. And then, the applause came. It was overwhelming, thunderous, and filled with admiration. But it wasn't the applause that mattered. What mattered was that Marcus had finally stepped into the light, had finally embraced the gift that had always been inside him. The competition didn't matter as much as the journey that had led him there. Marcus wasn't just the quiet kid anymore. He was a musician, a storyteller through his music, and that was more than enough. Marcus stood backstage, his hands still trembling slightly from the performance. The applause had been louder than he had expected, and the judges had seemed genuinely impressed. But despite the rush of validation, a part of him felt calm, even peaceful. The nerves that had once felt like chains had been replaced with a quiet confidence that he wasn't quite used to, but was slowly beginning to appreciate. As the competition ended and the participants were ushered into the lobby, Marcus found himself surrounded by other musicians, some of whom were much older, more experienced than he was. Yet, there was no feeling of intimidation, no anxiety about being out of place. He had proven something to himself, and that alone had made him feel like he belonged in this world. "Hey, Marcus, that was incredible." A voice called out. Marcus turned to find Justin, grinning widely as he pushed through the crowd to reach him. "I didn't know you could play like that," Justin continued, clapping him on the back. "You should have seen the look on everyone's faces when you hit that last note. They were stunned." Marcus laughed, a soft, genuine sound that surprised even him. "Thanks, man. I honestly didn't know if I could pull it off, but I just let the music take over." "You've got a real gift," Justin said, his voice full of admiration. "I'm serious. Have you thought about doing more of this? You could go places, you know." The word struck Marcus deeply, more than he expected. He had always been content with just playing for himself, sharing his music with a select few. But hearing Justin's belief in him made him think, could this really be more than just a one-time thing? As they talked more about the experience, Marcus began to realize that the competition had opened his eyes to something he had never allowed himself to consider: there was a future for him in music. Maybe not as a professional performer, but in some way, music would always be a part of his life, whether it was performing for others, teaching, or just continuing to grow and explore his talent. That evening, as Marcus sat alone in his room with his violin, the weight of the decision he had made seemed to settle over him. He had come to a crossroads. The world of music wasn't something he had expected to be a part of when he first picked up the violin, but it was now undeniable. He could no longer hide behind the walls of self-doubt. He had taken the first step, and he was beginning to see a path ahead of him, one that was full of potential. The next morning, as he walked into school, he was greeted with a mixture of smiles and nods. His classmates no longer saw him as the quiet, overlooked student. They saw him for the talent he had shared with them, and that made all the difference. Mrs. Bentley was waiting for him in the hallway. "You were exceptional last night, Marcus," she said with a proud smile. "I knew you had it in you. I'm proud of you, and I think you should continue pursuing this. You've got a lot of potential, and I'd be honored to help you develop it further." Marcus felt a swell of gratitude toward her. She had been the first one to recognize his gift and give him the encouragement he needed to believe in himself. Her support meant more than words could express. As the weeks went by, Marcus continued to practice and grow in ways he hadn't expected. He started working on new pieces, exploring different genres, and even collaborating with other musicians in his school. There was a new energy to his playing, a joy that had been missing before. He was no longer just trying to prove something to others. He was playing for himself, because he loved it, because it was who he was. One afternoon, after school, Mrs. Bentley approached him again, this time with a new opportunity. "There's an advanced music academy opening up this summer," she said, her eyes bright with excitement. "They're offering scholarships to students who show real promise. I think you should apply. You've got the talent, Marcus. I've seen it firsthand." The idea of applying for something like that had never crossed his mind. An academy? A scholarship? But the more Marcus thought about it, the more the idea began to take root. The possibility of learning from renowned musicians, refining his craft, and being part of something bigger was too good to pass up. He smiled at Mrs. Bentley. "I'll think about it." As the summer approached, Marcus found himself with more options than he had ever imagined. The future was no longer a source of fear, it was full of potential, filled with doors waiting to be opened. Music had done more than just change how others saw him. It had transformed the way he saw himself. And, for the first time, Marcus believed he could walk through those doors. The summer arrived quicker than Marcus had expected, bringing with it the warmth of possibilities. He spent the weeks leading up to his decision immersed in his music, practicing with a dedication he had never known. The hours seemed to slip away as his violin became an extension of himself, each note a part of his journey, each melody a reflection of the struggles he had overcome. When the application for the music academy arrived, Marcus hesitated for only a moment before filling it out. He had always been cautious, second-guessing himself at every turn, but this time felt different. The Marcus who had once been afraid of stepping into the spotlight, of exposing himself to judgment, was no longer the same person. He had found his voice, and now he was ready to let it be heard. A week later, he received the email. The subject line read, "Congratulations." His heart raced as he clicked open the message. The Music Academy had accepted his application and offered him a full scholarship. The email was filled with congratulations, outlining the details of his acceptance and the upcoming orientation. Marcus sat still, the weight of it all sinking in. A scholarship. He had done it. He had taken a risk, put himself out there, and it had paid off. The future, once a blur of uncertainty, was now a clear path before him. Later that day, he showed the email to his mother, who burst into tears the moment she read it. "I knew you could do it," she whispered, hugging him tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Marcus." As the reality of his acceptance settled in, Marcus felt a mixture of excitement and disbelief. The academy was known for nurturing some of the most talented musicians in the world, and here he was, a kid who had once been afraid of playing in front of a class, now standing on the edge of something extraordinary. It felt surreal, but it also felt like the beginning of a new chapter. The day of his departure for the academy came quickly. His suitcase was packed with more than just clothes, it was filled with dreams, aspirations, and a violin that had come to represent everything he had fought for. His mother drove him to the academy, her eyes proud and hopeful. "Remember, Marcus," she said as they pulled up to the grand building, "this is just the beginning. You've earned this, and I know you'll do great things." Marcus smiled, his heart full. He had come a long way from the quiet kid in the back of the classroom. He had found his voice, his passion, and now he was ready to take the next step into the world he had always dreamed of. As he entered the academy's main hall, he was met with the sounds of other students practicing, the hum of possibility in the air. It was a world he had once thought was beyond his reach, but now it was his. The next few years would be filled with challenges, growth, and opportunities to further hone his craft, but Marcus was ready. He had already overcome the hardest part, believing in himself. And as he stood there, looking around at the incredible talent that surrounded him, Marcus knew one thing for certain: his journey had just begun, and it was going to be a beautiful ride.